Greetings. Um, my name is Shante Paradigm Smalls, and I am giving the weekly Dharma gathering talk tonight, January 20th, 2021. And this talk is actually pre-recorded because in the United States, it's inauguration day of a new presidential administration. And we wanted to be cognizant of the kind of energetic, busyness of that day. And so I wanted to offer a talk that I think is always, or on a topic that I think is always necessary, but feels very poignant. Originally, back in November, I think, when we were planning out the schedule, I had scheduled a talk. I was going to talk about compassionate wrath and wrathful compassion. And I think compassionate wrath and wrathful compassion does tie in a little bit to what I'll be talking about tonight, victory over aggression. But it's just a different side or different tenor of the same principles of protection. But tonight, those principles of protection really come from spaciousness and being able to hold one's seat. So tonight's talk is victory over aggression. Aggression being one of the three poisons in Buddhism: passion, aggression, and ignorance. And aggression is often associated with speed and a lack of spaciousness. And so this victory over aggression actually starts with ourselves, and then working with like our environment or, things closest to us. So family, work, neighborhood, state, whatever, and then spreading out to others that are beyond our more immediate circle, and then beyond that, and beyond that, and beyond that. And so I'd like to begin by just asking us to take a seat or to get into a comfortable position, whatever that may be. That could be standing, that could be sitting on a couch or on a meditation cushion or a chair, or that could be laying down. And to feel our relationship to the earth and to the space that our bodies, both our physical bodies and our energetic bodies, take up. And feeling in this connection to the groundedness, the ground, the literal ground, that makes up part of our being. And then feeling above and around us, the sky, our siblings in the sky, planets and the stars. And then feeling at the kind of heart or earthling level, our environment. And so that earth, sky, and then heart or humanity or people, beings. And just checking in with our body, noticing if we're just the quality of our body. Are we tight? Are we loose? Are we good? Are we more forward? Are we more back? Are we tilted to the side? Feeling into how our emotions are. How am I feeling in my heart center? Again, we're not trying to change or categorize necessarily, but just to check in, to notice what the ground is, what the context is. And then finally, we just check in with our minds. What is the quality of our minds, our discursive thoughts, our discourse, our thinking, the motion of our minds? And then I invite you to feel the body breathing as your anchor. And here I'm going to invite you to keep your eyes open and the gaze soft. If that feels difficult, you certainly can close your eyes with a soft gaze. And I'm going to ask that your gaze just be at the horizon level. Again, soft, where you're seeing, you're taking in information, but you're not looking, right? You're just letting your eyes rest in space, like your body resting in space. And here, the object of meditation is really resting in space itself. If you feel yourself getting really lost or unraveling or unsettled, you can always come back to the body, feeling of the ground, feeling of your butt on the seat, feeling of the breath in your body. And then if you're ready, you can just rest in space. And here we just let thoughts, physical sensations, and emotions arise, abide, and dissolve on their own as we rest in space. If this is very easy for you, excellent. If this is very difficult, excellent. It's okay to just come back to what's more manageable. And if you're somewhere in the middle, excellent. You can just work with that. Again, here when you notice if you drift off or if you're lost in thought, instead of trying to sort of cut it by saying thinking, or just notice and come back to resting in space. The thoughts will dissolve on their own eventually. In this way, it's like the difference between when you notice something and you say, "Oh, hey, there's a deer," and then you put your eyes back on the road if you're driving, and when you notice the deer and you just come back. That's the sort of difference in technique. Okay. So I'd like to just offer up, as part of the practice of victory over aggression, victory over war is the slogan, but I wanted to make it more general. Aggression is to begin by acknowledging the land that I'm on, and perhaps you want to do the same. And sometimes people have questions about land acknowledgement. Is it just something that is theatrical or gets introduced as a kind of virtue signaling, and anything can be that, right? But for me, how it really matters to my meditation practice and to my Dharma practice is that it's about what meditation is about, which is about being clear about where and what things are versus my fantasy of them or a story that benefits me. And so acknowledging the people and the land that was stolen from them, the legacies that were stolen, even though the names still exist in many places, the way that's been erased and attributed to European colonial settlers is part of the fantasy of what we call the United States and other places that are were violently settled by colonizers. So I live on Lenape-Hoking, Lenape-Hoking, which is a large landmass, and there are other people who were also here with the Rockaway and the Canarsie, and those names still exist as sections of Brooklyn, New York, and Brooklyn is a Dutch word. And so I'm on this Lenape-Hoking, Rockaway, Canarsie land, and the people and their descendants and the energetic beings or the Dralas are still here. And I want to have those words and terms roll off my tongue and be in my mind the same way that I was taught, and many of us were taught, the names of the colonizers' ships, but not the land on which they landed and the people who were here. And that, what am I doing to work with this practice of decolonizing land, and as well as the history of this land that goes way, 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 way back, many thousands of years. And that this land also was a place where Africans were human trafficked and enslaved. That's right, in New York City. It is also a place where many migrants and immigrants were abused and dispossessed, as well as the indigenous dispossession and Black African disenfranchisement. And so part of victory over aggression is becoming clear about what the full story is. Sometimes they call that equanimity. And not only being invested in the things that, the stories that make me feel big or safe or powerful. So I'd like to talk about two aspects of victory over aggression using slogans, and a talk on the three metaphors of the Dorje Kasang. And Dorje Kasang means, Dorje is the same word as Vajra. Dorje in Tibetan is Vajra in Sanskrit. Indestructible Dharma protectors. Dorje, indestructible. Ka, Dharma Sangha people, protectors. And these teachings are quite powerful, and they're rooted in the Tibetan Bön warrior culture coming from historical figure Gesar of Ling, but they're also part of the Buddhist lineage of enlightened warriorship or protectors in the Vajrayana tradition. So I have some protectors behind me. Yama, the Red Bull, the Death Eater, and anyway, various protectors. And so there are these slogans that those of us in the Kasang, and I took a lifetime oath to be a member of the Dorje Kasang, and the Kasang really are responsible for protecting Dharma spaces, and people within those Dharma spaces. Holding the container so that people can practice, and whatever arises, sometimes wildness arises in people, and not just in our minds, but in our actions. Sometimes sickness arises. And it's the Kasang hold the space so that teachers can teach, the Dharma can be experienced, and so that practitioners can be deeply invested in their practice. So sometimes Kasang are outside of the shrine room, or doing other things, left out practice. And in order to really work with that practice of holding space for people, one needs to practice quite a bit daily. And it's holding space without aggression or rigidity or superiority or kind of fixation or neurosis. And in particular, it's being able to work with the aggression that arises from in the self, from kind of like wanting to be in on things or wanting to be special. So sometimes the Kasang wear matching outfits so you can identify us, but also to work with humility. And also the aggression that sometimes is directed at space holders, witnesses, or observers. There are these in all kinds of spaces. In the evangelical church, Pentecostal church I grew up in, we had deacons and deaconesses and ushers who held that space. Woo! And that was my a first real example of Kasang in my life. They knew how to hold space, and they had many different talents. Some were nurses, and they wore white a lot of times, and there was a sense that they were protecting the space. Even though a lot of them were older, it wasn't like they were gonna necessarily beat anyone up. I mean, I don't know, but they were powerful. And they were like, no, you can't go there. Or, no, or yes, I can help you, So one of the, there's many forms of training in the Dorje Kasang, but one of the forms of training have to do with memorizing 8 slogans. And these 8 slogans are not just words or mantra to say, although they can be part of mind protections and reminders, but they're also Dharma that can be lived by. And so the first one is very interesting because it seems to not be related to aggression. Have confidence to go beyond hesitation. But this confidence here is not egoism, and the hesitation isn't just like, oh, should I do it? But it's about trusting my innate qualities, the sanity I was born with. It's about trusting in my awakened nature. It's about egolessness. and not having to have all the answers, but being confident that I will have the skills because I've trained, I've sat, I've worked with my mind and heart and body. Alert before you daydream. So a lot of times when one is holding space, whether that's for family or friends or a sangha or at work, it can be tempting to kind of pretend, like look on the outside like you're there, and then just kind of be entertaining yourself with fantasies and daydreams. And in our individual practice, that's something we work with. But when we're really tasked with holding space for others, we have a little bit of a perky quality where it's not just me, but I'm responsible for having a safe, relatively safe, because there's no absolute safety, but a relatively safe, a relatively sane, a relatively strong container, because others are depending on that. And the teachings really can flourish in that kind of space. Mindful of all details, be resourceful when performing your duties. So sometimes things happen, maybe in the context, let's say, of work, the Zoom goes out, or the link, or, and instead of going into a panic or self-blame or self-centeredness, how do I use the resources available to me internally and externally? Preparing, not just winging things. And, performing my duties with resourcefulness and a kind of boundlessness and a kind of, I don't give up. Fearless beyond idiot compassion. Another way to talk about idiot compassion is, could say it's people pleasing, or it's manipulation, or it's laziness, or it's a kind of compulsion to want people to like you or to seem spiritual, right? But this fearlessness, so compassion is about co-suffering, going through, sharing. And so this fearlessness is like, I'm going to go there with you. And I'm not going to go there with you out of should, or I want you to like me, or that makes me look good, because I trust my nature and I know my nature, so that I can be fearless, not without fear, but walk through the fear, walk with the fear, use the energy of the fear to be present for others and have support, right? So we don't do these things alone. Be a warrior without anger. This one can be very difficult, particularly because warriorship in many of our minds is associated with a kind of fierce energy, if not, outright aggression, violence. And so warriorship here is really about trust. Again, trusting in our basic nature. And so the idea of the warrior, one of the images of the warrior is that the warrior is outfitted in resplendent armor from head to toe. And at the heart center is open, carved out, so that we can be pierced by life's arrows. And so that my warriorship doesn't come from the well of anger, although I can use, if I'm skillful, if I have the skillful means, I can use the energy of anger to remind myself of my abilities as a warrior, but that I don't, I don't have to get worked up in order to be a warrior. I don't have to say how bad people are in order to be a warrior. I am a warrior. And my energy and my warriorship comes from bodhicitta, comes from basic goodness, basic sanity, fundamental worthiness. It doesn't come from the actions of others, the violence of others. It's not dependent on anyone else. It is an endless well that I can draw from, whether people are good, bad, indifferent, whether they act like assholes or angels. That I am a warrior for wakefulness, of wakefulness, with wakefulness, towards wakefulness. Not afraid to be a fool. I love this one because it reminds me of the power of having a sense of humor about myself and about the world, and that chaos is a part of that. Chaos is what the kind of environments always are, and we sometimes try to organize chaos, right, over a course of time so that people can settle and hear. But that I'm not afraid to, not afraid to be a fool also reminds me of the Lojong Buddhist slogan, drive all blames into one. I'm not afraid to take on that kind of blame, or, well, that didn't go right. And someone, that's right. That's all right. I'm not afraid to to hold the kind of mistakes. That's part of being alive. An invisible heavy hand. So I don't need to tell people what I'm doing. And heavy hand doesn't mean like heavy handed, but it means like I'm working with others to guide things, but I don't have to tell everyone what I'm doing. I'm working with others to hold the space, but I don't have to say, and I'm holding the space. And without me, and I should be unobtrusive in my holding. I should let things arise that need to arise. And when I need to intervene, that intervention is also invisible. It's kind. It's at an appropriate time. And the final slogan is also related to that: be precise without creating a scene. So sometimes with precision, many of us get tight and we get neurotic. That's supposed to be over there. That's supposed to be over there. And again, that's drawing a lot of attention to myself. It's taking people's attention away from what they need to be doing, and putting it on me. There's a way the ego gets in the way, and my precision is drawing, with my precise behavior, I'm drawing people to me, rather than just doing what needs to be done at the time it needs to be done, the way it needs to be done, without getting in the way. So those are the 8 slogans of the Dorje Kasang. 1, have confidence to go beyond hesitation. 2, alert before you daydream. 3, mindful of all details, be resourceful in performing your duties. 4, fearless beyond idiot compassion. 5, be a warrior without anger. 6, not afraid to be a fool. 7, an invisible heavy hand. 8, be precise without creating a scene. So before I talk about the 3 metaphors of wind, container, and horizon, why this kind of practice? Can I just do metta practice or Maitri? Tonglan, of course. Right? And these are those kinds of practices. But these are also practices of spaciousness. Oh, Mahamudra or Ati, Dzogchen, where we're working with space itself and unadorned space, and not trying to manipulate it, but trying to work with it. So there's a kind of ground path and fruition, right? And the ground is that the Dharma and that the teachers of the Dharma are here to teach us fearlessly the truth of the non-existence of, or non-solidity, let's say, of ego, right, of self. But of course, there's this representation or presentation of me, but at an ultimate level, the Dharma is to say, hey, it's all emptiness, luminosity, which is not nothingness, but it's all stuff that arises and then abides and then dissolves. So the Dharma and the Dharma teachers present that. And so sometimes people wild out when they hear that in different ways, right? And so this path is that it's uncompromising in many ways, although it can be presented gently, or it can be presented more fiercely, it can be presented more neutrally. And that it's that sometimes message that it's emptiness, luminosity, the ego is non-existent, the self is non-existent, can provoke a kind of reaction in people, neurotic or aggression, or right. There could be verbal attacks, physical attacks. There could be work to undermine the three jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so the fruition is then we need, the view, right, is that we need protection to hold space. And it's based on non-aggression, spaciousness, gentleness, right? Spaciousness and gentleness are synonyms here. And it's motivated by compassion and understanding what other beings are going through. Like, yeah, I identify with that provoked aggressive response, right? But when you hear the truth sometimes. I won't get too into those, but I just wanted to say that. So sorry, my table is shaking. And if you have questions, you're more than welcome to email me, Shante at shanteparadigm.com, or you can always email Weekly Dharma Gathering and they will forward it to me. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the three metaphors: wind, container, and horizon. So wind, container, horizon, three metaphors, or whatever. So I'll just read a little bit. Wind, your duty is this. Suppose there are lots of clouds around the sun. Your duty is to create wind so that the clouds could be removed, so that there could be a clear sky and the sun could shine. That's the duty of the Dorje Kasang. So what is that saying? Well, when the Dharma, when the truth is proclaimed, sometimes it can be obscured by obstacles like ignorance or aggression or sloppiness, or a sloppy container or a noisy container. And the wind here is like a gentle reminder, or a gentle, precise path clearing, so that the sun of Buddha Dharma can shine on all of us. We can feel its rays. And the wind refreshes the environment. very interestingly, today on January 20th, there's been a lot of wind in the environment to hopefully refresh some of the staleness of white supremacy and fascism and aggression that's been and violence that's been completely pumped up to an unprecedented level in recent times in this country. And so the wind is a gentle breeze or sometimes a powerful breeze that makes it possible to study and hear and feel and listen and practice with clarity and delight. So that's wind. Container. I'll again read. Kasang act as a pure vessel. What is contained in the vessel are students, and what is inside of that is the wick, so that I, the teacher, can teach. If there were no kasang, then we would have no impact. We would have no real thing. So in some ways, the container is the most kind of felt aspect of this, because you may not notice when the container is a good one, but you definitely notice when there's a leaky container, whether that's, you're at a restaurant and there's just like a lot of inefficiencies and poor service, or whether things are breaking down in family and friends communication, or you're traveling and you can, the car breaks down. But the container is really the space, any space that is being held by those tasked with holding it. And so that whoever then is also the shining the light of the teachings of the Dharma, that they're not being blown away or snuffed out. And that presence of the being able to work with what's arising is like illumination. It illuminates the space as well, right? It's not just the space itself, but it's being the illumination that helps and reflects that back, so people want to pay attention to the teacher without aggression. Without, it's not about worship, but it's like, I want to hear the teachings. And it's not about being tight, but it's about being flexible and yet precise. And finally, horizon. The sun analogy is that when we look at the sun shining in the sky, that sun is always framed by a horizon of some kind. And because there is a horizon and there are mountains and you have your own eyelids to look at the sun, therefore you can see it clearly, properly. Otherwise, you can't see the sun. You'll be just lost in outer space, floating around. And so this refers to having a reference point, having a context. The context and now allows for there to be a kind of a relaxed order to things, or a natural hierarchy, and hierarchy not based on value, but based on kind of what needs to get done, right? So it's not an imposed hierarchy. So for instance, the teacher sits in a place where everyone can hear the teacher. That could be in a circle, that could be in a dais, that could be, in a rows. But there's some kind of, where the teacher is, the orientation, like we can orient to the sun. We know where it is, right? Partly because there's a horizon to frame it. We know where the exits are if we're in a room, right? And so when this is done skillfully, no one feels, it's not about putting people down or putting them in their place, but it's about providing space for there to be a place to relax into. So these teachings come from the Dorje Kasang handbook, but there's also a book that's for sale generally if you're interested in these teachings, called True Command, the teachings of the Dorje Kasang. And that's by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, volume 1. There may be a volume 2. I don't have it. But it's a very, it's talks from the Maki Rabjam, Dorje Jadal of Mokpo, or Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. So how do we practice this in our own lives if we're not Kasang? So I just want to offer a few ideas. One thing that sometimes that I often hear, I want to encourage people to engage in some kind of bodily practice that orients you towards protection of self and other. So it could be just a couple of self-defense moves or classes. There are lots of spaces like feminist and queer and trans spaces that offer free self-defense classes or bystander intervention classes or upstander intervention classes. And those are some of the things we would do when I was in charge of the Kasang in New York. Those kinds of trainings were really important for everyone. But we learn, how do we intervene into aggression? There are skills for that that we see happening in the world. So that's one thing I would offer. I've done trained as a martial artist and done different kinds of trainings for diffusing situations, mediation. Another practical thing to do is to have some kind of training in CPR or first aid or mental health first aid. Because again, we can be part of helping a situation, being a protector, being someone who holds space, being someone who's able to care for others. I need to renew my CPR certification. So that's another thing I'd offer. And the third thing is to engage in practices that are about around speech. So mediation or restorative justice trainings, transformative justice trainings, community circles, truth and reconciliation commissions and committees. That kind of work actually is embodied work that works to reduce the impact of trauma, harm, and aggression that's impacted communities and individuals. And a real commitment to these things as a space holder, not just a kind of for the flash of it, but rather to really engage in transforming spaces, places, interactions, communities, dynamics, institutions, families, relationships, interpersonal relationships. And that we can use these teachings anywhere. You know, it really starts, it's grounded in our own meditation practice, in our own practice of awareness, internal and external. Our own ability to work with space. You know, when we're meditating and someone makes a noise, or the kids or the dog or the neighbors, or I'm pointing because my neighbors are loud, you know, or whatever, that we're able to not just throw our hands in the air and say, I'm trying to meditate. Why are you, you know, people making all this noise, you know? But we're able to hold our seat. And then once we're really able to hold our seat, we're then able to work with others and hold our seat in very difficult situations, sometimes dangerous situations. And so I would encourage people to be working with a teacher or to be working with a meditation instructor or a Dharma instructor. You know, none of Dharma is meant to be gone alone. I know the idea is people like, oh, I'm going to go into a cave, but the cave by ourselves is not one of the 3 jewels of Buddha Dharma. It's the Buddha as an example, the Dharma as the truth that we practice, and the Sangha as a community we practice with. So Sangha, others are meant to be in our practice. So I want to thank you for listening to my talk. I hope that it was helpful. Next week, we'll be back with a live talk with the wonderful Sheena Brockington Taylor, who I believe is doing a teaching on compassion practices. And we just encourage you to become a subscriber. You can go to weeklydharmagathering.com and become a monthly subscriber or a yearly subscriber. You can gift subscriptions. We also have a 7-day free trial where you can just watch as many videos as you can in 7 days. So thank you for your practice. May you be well, may you be safe, may you be sane, may you be free. May all beings be liberated in our lifetime and beyond.